So with your permission, we'll try to do a quick review, starting with the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Beis. Haba b'machteres. Now, he breaks into someone's house, and Nidon al Shem Sofa, which means that he's Chayav Misa. And the reason is going to be explained in the Gemara, because there's a chazaka that the Bailim will be Omid al Shalo, and then the Baba Machteres realizes that, and he's already prepared for a confrontation, do or die, with the Baal Habayis. Baba Machteres v'shiber es hachavis. So what happens is that he's now in the Machteres, which we said that with the very exceptional case of a father who breaks into his son's house, which is called Yesh Lo Damim, in all other cases, he's Chayav Misa, and therefore when he breaks the Chavis, so the Mishnah says that he's pot. The only time he's Chayav is in the case that I mentioned before, that very rare case of Yesh Lo Damim. Yemein Lo Damim, pot. Yes, so we are now starting the Gemara on Daf Ayin Beis. Yeah, which we did already in the past, but I want to do a review because it's going to be almost virtually impossible to build up on the sugya without going back to the basics. So we're on Daf Ayin Beis, Rosh Tevis Azariah Berzon, and we're starting the Gemara. Omar Rava. Okay, so Rava is going to try to explain why the Baba Machteres is Chayav Misa. And why does Kimle b'Rabbaneh apply in the case of Baba Machteres? After all, ostensibly, he's a burglar, he's there to steal. So Rav explains, Chazaka ein adam mamid atzma mamon. A person is not going to be passive and allow a burglar just to come in and clean him out. And therefore, Vahai, and this Ganav is already aware when he breaks into the Machteres that this is going to happen, that there's a very good chance that the Baal Bayis is going to confront him. And he azilna, and if Becholzot, nevertheless, knowing that the Baal Bayis is going to come out there with a shotgun, nevertheless, he decides to break in, and he realizes that he's going to have to confront the Baal Bayis, Koil Apoi, below Shavakli, the Baal Bayis is not going to allow me just to continue. If he'll stand against me and he will threaten my life, then I will kill him. But Torah Omra, in Bala Hargacha, Hashkem Lahargam. So since the Baba Machteres is breaking into the house of the Baal Bayis, knowing full well, yes.
So you have to go to like 8:31.
All right. We'll see. But Ma'ariv is officially at 8:30. Okay, that's my call to let you guys free. Okay, then.
So that means that the Baba Machteres is considered a road day?
Correct. The Baba Machteres is Chayav Misa. And you may recall that Rashi, as we discussed way before Pesach, points out that this Kimle b'Rabbaneh has to be understood in the light of Tanit Beit Chizkiah. Tanit Beit Chizkiah is of the opinion that Chayav Misa Shogegim are potter from Tashlumin. And you may recall that proves that Kimle b'Rabbaneh is not a din in Bezdin, but rather it's a p'tur. And we had a long discussion about that. I'm just mentioning it just to arouse your memory. HaTorah Omrim Bala Hargacha. Now that we know that the Ganav, who is Baba Machteres, is going to go as far as to kill the Baal Bayis if need be, and he realizes this up front, so he's already planned from the get-go that if the Baal Bayis will confront him, and we have a chazaka that that's going to happen because Ein Adam Omid Al Mamono, therefore the Ganav is already prepared to a face-to-face duel, what we call the duel to die, in order to defeat the Baal Bayis who's confronting him. and therefore he's considered a bala hargacha. And you may recall again, just Steve, what's your Hebrew name? I always forget. Tzvi, sorry, Tzvi. I know him from when he was a little younger. Anyway, Tzvi, so I'm just, I wanted to give a little bit of a review, and I apologize, but you may be able to catch the review. Hoping the boys are Iluyim like you are. Anyway, so we spoke about a machlokes here between the Ran and us, so to speak. Because the Ran interprets this whole business about a chazaka in terms of a reality check. In other words, this chazaka, according to the Ran, is just a way in which we could predict what's going to happen and therefore enter into the mindset of the Bava Machteres, who is aware of what the, shall we call it, the statistical probability of what's going to evolve over here. But we suggested a different shot, and it was very hard for us to read it into the Ran, but it made sense to us that this word chazaka here is not just a reality check. It's not just what we call circumstantial evidence, that we assume that the Baal Bayis is going to defend his own possessions. But it means more than that. The chazaka here gives him rights as the owner to defend his property. Yeah, we said that's the law in Britain as well, if you remember that whole discussion. Okay, now we get to the question of Nezikin. As we saw in the Mishnah, if the Bava Machteres destroys Kaleb, then he doesn't have to pay for the Kaleb. And we apply the principle of Kim Le B'derabmine. And now we have a machlokes between Rav and Rava. How far can we go with Kim Le B'derabmine? Rav is going to take this very, very far. How far? Amar Rav, Bava Machteres v'notal Kaleb. This is not what it says in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah it says v'shiber Kaleb. So let's assume that in the Mishnah, the Bava Machteres is in the Machteres, and while he's in the Machteres, he breaks Kaleb. And that incurs a chiyuv tashlumin called tashlumin nezikin, but because of Kim Le B'derabmine, he's not chayiv in tashlumin. Because the halach of Kim Le B'derabmine establishes that a chiyuv misa patters you up from a chiyuv tashlumin. But Rav goes a major step further. Instead of Shibras HaKelim, what does Rav have? Ari, can you help me out here? Notal. He has Notal. Take a look at that very important word, Notal. Notal means that he didn't break the Kelim, but rather he grabbed onto the Kelim and took them out of the Machteres. And he doesn't have to pay for that. The Torah tells me that a Ganav has to pay, and that's called the Heshiv Zela Asher Gazal. So if the object was destroyed, and it's not be'en, then you talk about a chiyuv tashlumin, and then you apply the principle of Kim Le B'derabmine. That's the Mishnah. But Rav is saying that there's a whole different halacha here that goes way, way beyond this. And we're not talking about tashlumin Nezikin, we're talking about the object is be'en. Lo tehei chotei niskar gadol mizeh. A man breaks into your house, chas v'sholom, right? And he steals your Mona Lisa, and he doesn't have to return it to you. Why? Because of Kim Le B'derabmine. And Rav points out my timer, b'damim kaninu, that somehow through damim, because we're talking about a case of ein lo damim. What does ein lo damim mean? He's chayav misa, right? He's bala hargacha. He has a din of a rodev, and he's threatening your life, and therefore his chayav misa is going to generate a halacha of what? Of Kim Le B'derabmine, and that's called in the language of Rav b'damim kaninu. And Rav is not happy with this. Amar Rava, mistavran milsa de Rav sheshiber. Had he broken the kelim, as we saw in the Mishnah, then I apply Kim Le B'derabmine, and he doesn't have to pay the tashlumin of a mazik. And that's called the lesnu. The object doesn't exist in the world, and then instead of returning the object, because the object is less nahu, it's no longer bad, then he's chayiv in tashlumin. That's called tashlumin nezikin, in this case, out of a mazik. But since he was chayiv misa, therefore he doesn't have to pay tashlumin, because he can't be mechayiv someone misa and tashlumin simultaneously. Like the Mishnah says in Masechet Sanhedrin, Perkakones, that if a person burns down his friend's haystack, so he's part to be tashlumin. Why? On Shabbos, excuse me. Shekain b'schayv v'nafsho. So you cannot impose a chiyuv misa and a chiyuv tashlume mazik for the same action. That I understand, says Rav. Aval, but here, right, we're going to rip off Attai at this point. Aval, natal lo. But in the case of natal, we can't apply kim levi the Rabbine. The Torah says that a ganav has to return the object. If the object is still be'en, the heshiv's like tzela asher goes on. And that's Rav's objection to Rav.
Saying that carrying that role of a vessel into
Oh, excellent. So Ari points out that perhaps we could begin our adventure, it's like a journey to understand Rav, by introducing what we call kinyone gzela. Now, in the case of a stolen lulav, there's another problem besides the excellent. In addition to lakachtem lachem, and maybe we can solve the problem of lakachtem lachem for the benefit of the ganav, but we have a different problem called mitzvah haba b'aver. What about the problem of lachem? So the Gemara speaks about kinyone gneva, which is a mind-boggling concept, a very deep-rooted halachic concept in Seder Nezikin, that a ganav actually acquires kinyonim. And Rav is saying that if a ganav could acquire kinyonim, then he would not have to return the original object. But is that so?
That was the Rosh.
So in a normal case of a regular ganav, sheyesh lo domin, we're not talking about above machteres, then he's got to return the object. You can't claim, well, it's yours and you have kinyonim. You may have what we call mixas kinyonim. You have the beginning of kinyonim, and we'll see how that expresses itself in legal terms in halacha. But you certainly don't have a complete kinyon, because the Torah says you have to return the object to its original owner. And therefore, in the case of baba machteres, where it's elo domim, the only way that we could possibly make sense out of the sheet of Rav is by applying the principle of kim levi the Rabbine. And that's called elo domim. So if it's yesh lo domim, well, he might have had a kinyan to some extent, the ganav, but he's got to return the object. So his kinyan could not be complete because he has to return the object. And basically, the nignav, the owner of the object, is saying that my object is in your possession. I have a right to get it back. And that's v'heshiv is like zelo. But now, says Rav, in a case of elo domim, and the nignav is coming to the baba machteres, to the ganav, and he's saying to him, well, give me back my object. V'heshiv is like zelo shor gaza. Says Rav, no. He already made a kinyan on it. And if he made a kinyan on it, it's his.
Could you, Rav, the Heshivas Gazela Shagazal is considered tashlumin, maybe?
Oh, excellent. Okay, so that's the discussion that we wanted to have with the Rashash and so forth. But just I want to let the kasha sink in, because this is going to be Rava's objection to Rav. I mean, Rava can't even tolerate Rav. He doesn't understand how Rav could say that the baba machteres is holding on to the object, be'en, and he doesn't have to return it. In other words, what Rav is telling us is that kim levi the Rabbine will remove the chiyuv of v'heshiv zagzela shor gaza. As a result of the fact that he was chayav misa, the baba machteres, therefore he doesn't have to return the object. And Rav is arguing, what are you talking about? V'heshiv zagzela shor gaza. What does it have to do with the chayav misa? The chiyuv misa could pater him up from what? Tashlumin. And that's the case of shiber, of mazik, where the mazik is chayav tashlumin. But says Rava, this case is not a case of tashlumin. It's not shiber but natal. And if it's not shiber but natal, then we're not talking about tashlumin. The owner of the object comes by and he says, I want my object back. It's my object. No. It's not your object. Why? Because it came later the Rabbi. And we're racking our brains to try to figure out how Rav understood that Kim Leib the Rabbi could somehow remove the Heshivas Agzela Shargazal, such that now the Baba Machteres makes an absolute kinyan on the bed. And one thing we said is absolutely clear, that according to Rav, the blockage that prevents the kinyan of a ganav from maturing in a case of yesh lo tov, a regular case of a ganav, is the heshiv sagzela shagazal. If we can nip the heshiv sagzela shagazal in the bud, to use that idiomatic phrase, then memela, the kinyan of the ganav will mature and become a complete kinyan. So again, it works like this. There's like a confrontation here. We'll call it a tug of war. On the one hand, the ganav has a kinyan, and we're going to prove that from many halachas. For example, just to mention one that we discussed last time, a ganav doesn't have to pay for tashmishim, which means that if I take your object, I should be paying you rental fees for any benefit that I get. So if I steal your ice skates, and ice skating, costs you, let's say, 100 shekel an hour, then the ganav should be paying the 100 shekel because he went ice skating with the ice skates that he stole from the nignav. No, the halacha is that a ganav doesn't have to pay for tashmishim. Why? Because he's acquired ownership. We're going to see other halachas like ein shavet leganav. But before we get to that, the point here is that according to Rav, we have a confrontation. What's pulling in the opposite direction? What is the barrier that prevents the kinyan of the ganav from, shall we use the term, maturing and creating a full-fledged kinyan? What's the anti-force? Says Rav, in the case of Kim Levi the Rabbi, there's no Ve'eshiv Sagzela Shagazal, is Memela, what completes itself? The kinyan ganav. But then we get to the question, we're not happy here. How does Kim Levi the Rabbi operate here? Kim Levi the Rabbi tells you that there's no Chiv Tashlumin. But Kim Levi the Rabbi can't tell you that there's no Ve'eshiv Sagzela Shagazal. What does that have to do with Kim Levi the Rabbi? We're not punishing him. We're not demanding payment. All we're doing is the Baal Habayit has the right to say, give me back my object. How does Kim Levi the Rabbi remove Ve'eshiv Sagzela Shagazal?
The din of Kim Levi the Rabbi is a din d'Orabban or a din d'Oraisa?
D'Oraisa, for sure. We derive it from the parsha, Mishpatim, of Nogev es Ishahara. Do you want to go through that, or
No,
a man, is having a battle with his friend, and then he kills a woman, and the Torah says that he doesn't have to pay for the Dmei V'lodos. So Kim Levi Rabbi is D'Oraisa. And Rav says that in the case where there's Kim Levi Rabbi, there's no Ve'eshiv Sagzela Shagazal, and we're trying to figure that out. So we suggested last time a radical revolutionary chiddush of the Rashash. Rashash wants to suggest that we don't understand Ve'eshiv Sagzela Shagazal. We made a big mistake. We thought Ve'eshiv Sagzela means that the nignav has a right to retrieve or reclaim his object. That's the simple pshat. Says Rashash, no. The ganav, no less than a mazik, is chayiv in tashlumin. He's got to pay for the object that he stole. However, the various dinim that apply to tashlumin. For example, in Ezekiel, you have halacha of idis. What is idis? If you have different levels and qualities of karka, you have to pay for the best quality of karka. So the Torah is going to specify certain dinim and certain specific laws that apply to tashlumin. So you have ksuba, and there's tashlumin ksuba, and you have nizikin, and there's tashlumin nizikin. There are many, many different categories of tashlumin, and we have to see whether you pay with idis, with beilidis, with ziburis, and so on. The ganav has to pay with idis. What is idis in the case of metaltalin that was stolen? It's the object itself. The Rashash says that when the ganav returns the object, he's basically paying for the object.
It's a tashlumin.
It's a tashlumin. How does he pay for the object? So the Torah has various dinim and specific nuances of legal requirements, and the Torah set up a legal requirement that the tashlumin of a ganav has to be with the object. The object is now a medium for payment, for tashlumin. And if that be the case, this sheds a whole new light on Rav. Rav holds that since the Bava Machteres is a Rodef, and since the Bava Machteres is Chayiv Misa, therefore we apply the principle of Kimlei B'Rabine, and that's going to knock off the Tashlumin. And Rav holds that basically every Ganav could acquire ownership over the Gneva. The only thing that's the barrier that's preventing him is Ve'eshivus Akzela. If we can remove Ve'eshivus Akzela and neutralize, I'll be right with you, then Memela, the Ganav has a full-fledged Kinyan. That's exactly what Rav holds in the case of Bava Machteres. And why do we remove the Ve'eshivus Akzela that's preventing pulling back the Kinyan of the Ganav? Because of Ve'eshivus Akzela Shagaza. But in the case assuming Heshiv's Akzela Shagaza, like the Zikin is Tashlumin, then we apply Kimlei with Rabine, that pots itself up from Tashlumin, and therefore the Kinyan Ganav matures and completes itself.
So,
What is your name? I'm sorry.
Tzvi.
Tzvi.
I might be getting this wrong, but why is it then if the original object goes down in value, you can still give the original object back to the owner? If it's a Tashlumin, presumably you'd have to give the original object back plus.
So, Tzvi, can I hold off with your question? We're going to see the Gemara in Bava Kama about the question of whether the Ganav pays Kishas HaGneva or he pays according to Shas HaMoreh B'Din. We'll get our brains wrapped around that whole sugya as we go along.
Someone's idea, essentially, as soon as the Ganav takes an object, there's a transfer of ownership at that point in time.
Again, only in Ein Lo Damim. I just want to add that proviso. We're not talking about any Ganav. You understand what I mean? Any Ganav can't acquire ownership because the Torah imposes on him the Ve'eshivus Akzela. But Rav says, in the case of Ein Lo Damim,
Now it sounds like he has ownership, but it sounds like, I'm asking
Right.
the description.
But-
there is ownership, but the issue is there does not allow him to maintain that ownership.
correct, to complete that
But
ownership.
the moment I grab something, I'm the owner. I'm just according to this.
But it's an incomplete ownership.
because of
And that incomplete ownership expresses the fact that you can't take that object and put it into your kasef and say it's mine.
because the first definition of living in this case is the actual object.
Correct. And that's why in the case where the tashlumin comes in conflict with Kimlei B'Rabine, then we say we can't impose both a chiyuv visa and a tashlumin, and Rav holds, therefore, he owns the object. Correct? He owns the object.
Why do you say it's more extreme?
Say it again?
Say even more extreme, there's an absolute full total Kenyan. But there's a chiyuv on the Gavra of Tashlumin.
Okay, good.
There's no
Very
ranking
good.
bias at all.
Very good. That could be another pshat. We're gonna suggest that as another possibility. But just at this point, I wanted to get back to Rava, and let's see what Rava said. Rava said that he rejects Rav. According to Rava, we could say the following: we know that a ganav is chayav onsen. What does that mean? Reuven steals Shimon's cow, and the cow slips on a banana peel and dies. Normally, a shomer, with one exception, is potter from onsen. What's that one exception? A shomer. A ganav is another exception, and a ganav pays for onsen. Now, let's try to understand why a ganav pays for onsen. In the case of a shomer, we'll get to shoel in a minute. A shomer is chayav what? Well, without getting into the specifics, I mean, just in an abstract concept. What makes a shomer chayav? Okay, I'll give you a hint. It's a word that starts with an aleph and ends with a tav. Achrayus, right? Achrayus. A shomer, when he says hanach lefanai, is makabel achrayus. Achrayus does not include onsim. I'm not achra'i, I'm not responsible for an ones. There was no way under the sun that could have prevented it. So there's no level of achrayus. Achrayus is usually a reflection of an element of pshia. Again, there are different elements or dargis of pshia. But in the case of ones, there's no element of pshia. You know, the cow died of old age. You know, it's gestorben. Okay, that happens. You know, that's life. Nobody lives forever. Not even a cow, right? So why am I responsible? Now, in order to understand this, I think what Rav is arguing is let's take a look at a sugya Bava Kama Yud Aleph about shaman lemazik v'ein shaman l'shoel. Again, there's machlokas in the Gemara about what shaman l'shoel or not. So what happens? A shoel borrows a cow, and the cow steps into a bar, falls into the bottom of the bar, and dies. The shar, or the cow, whatever it was worth 500, a lot. How much is it worth now? It's worth 100. Why is it worth 100? Because the carcass is something that you can market and you can sell it, and you could use the animal. You know, it's an avela, and the goyim will buy it, or you can tan it and take off the hides, and so forth and so on. So the Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Yud Aleph vacillates with a machlokas amoraim as to how much does the shoel have to pay? One Mandiora says the shoel pays 400. That's all he has to pay. His negligence, so to speak, or his achrayus only extends to the damage of 400. The carcass is there. Come and take the carcass. And the other Mandiora says, Ein Shamin L'Shoel, which means that the shoel has to pay how much? 500. Let the shoel haul up the carcass from the bottom of the bar and sell it in the market. Oh, wait a second. What is that all about? Why is the shoel? We had two questions. First of all, why is the shoel chayav for onsim? I mean, that goes seemingly way beyond achrayus. You know, you can't tell me that achrayus would cover onsim. That's impossible. And secondly, what I don't understand is why, in the light of a hezek of 400, does the shoel, according to that man, the Yom says, Ein Shaman L'Shoel, means we don't evaluate the carcass. Why should he pay 500? And the answer and this is straight across the board. You'll find this in Rishonim, you'll find it in Achronim, even in the Achrei Achronim. And what do they say? That a shoel is chayiv, not midin achrayus. But why is he chayiv in onsim? Midin bailus. That since kol ano shalo, he has all the benefits like a bailim. So does a bailim have to pay for onsim on his own object? Basically, yes. He doesn't pay from one pocket to the other. But he suffers the loss because he owns the object. And now the shoel is considered a bailim, and therefore he has to pay for onsim because he has to suffer the loss of onsim like a bailim. So it's not midin achrayus. Now we have halacha of ein shaman leganav. That means that a ganav, if the cow that he stole was worth 500, now it's only worth 100, he will pay the entire sum of 500. Just like a shoel is ein shaman l'shoel, ein shaman leganav. Why? What is the undermining principle here? The underlying principle, excuse me. That the ganav has bias. So now we go back to Rav. Rav now has two proofs to establish that a ganav has kinyonim. Proof number one, he doesn't have to pay for tashmishin. So whatever benefits he got from the stolen object, the nignav cannot bill him for those payments, for those rental fees. And number two, the Gemara says explicitly that ein shaman leganav. So these two halachos will prove and establish beyond the shadow of a doubt that a Ganav has kinyonim. However, the Torah says that a Ganav is chayav in onsim. So not only is a chayav potur from tashmishim, not only does a Ganav have to pay the entire value, including the carcass, ein shamul Ganav, but now we have a third halacha which reflects the fact that a Ganav has a kinyan. And what's that? He's chayav in onsim. If he has to pay for onsim, it can't be b'toras achrayus, it's going to be b'toras bailus. And if it's b'toras bailus, then Rav is going to argue that he doesn't have to return the object because he's the bailam on the object. And if you'll ask me, but what about Veishiv's like Zela? Here, Rav is going to say that Kim Levi the Rabbi patters him up, it exempts him from Tashlim. If this be the case, I understand Rava. Rava is going to tell me that a Ganav is chayav ba'otzim b'toras achrayus. You'll ask me the question, how could you have achrayus on otzim? Rava apparently is of the opinion that in the case of a Ganav, the Torah imposed an achrayus level on the Ganav that goes beyond our wildest imagination. Namely, that a Ganav has to have achrayus even for otzim. You stole my object. I want it back. Oh, the animal died. I don't care when the animal died. You stole it. So the Torah imposes, according to Rava, a chiyuv achrayus on a Ganav, and that's why he's chayav onsim. And if it's only a chiyuv achrayus, then Rava argues we cannot apply the principle of kim lev the Rami in it, because the Torah says veishiv zak zel shagaza. And what are you going to tell me? Well, the object belongs to the Ganav. No, Rava says I reject it. The Ganav does not have ownership over the object. And I'm going to try to prove to you that this really is a machlokes in the Gemara Bava Kama Daf Yudal. So again, summarizing what we did until now, we're claiming that the machlokes between Rava and Rav revolves around kinyonik zelim. Rav understood that a Ganav is chayav in onsim because he has kinyonim, similar to what we said by Shoel, and therefore Ganav is ein shamul Ganav. And Rava holds no, the Torah imposed a level of achrayus on the Ganav that includes even what? Even onsim.
So why is he not having such mission? I mean, why is it?
Yeah, correct. We're going to have to deal with every single halacha that seems to indicate that a Ganav has kinyon. Is it possible to suggest the following? Rava agrees, in principle, to Rav that when a Ganav pays for onsim, he's considered a bailam. So now, what is the machlokas between Rav and Rav? At what point in time does the Ganav become a bailam? He pays for onsim, b'toras bailam. But when did he become a bailam?
Maybe only when the thing's not there anymore.
Exactly. Beautiful. Rav is of the opinion that the bailus of a Ganav, which emerges with the chiyuv onsim, will only be chal when the onus takes place. In other words, Rav is willing to say that once there was an onus and we're going to be machayev in b'toras bailim, that goes back to the time of the gneva. So it means that the Ganav, in the case of Ein Lo Domim, according to Rav, acquired ownership because when the onus is going to happen, he's going to be a bailim, but that doesn't mean he became a bailim at the moment of the onsim. He was a bailim from, as we would say, the get-go, from the moment that he stole it. Whereas Rava would say, no. He only becomes a bailim from the moment of the onsim. And if that be the case, then Rav is going to reject Rav because Rav's premise is that the Ganav, the Baba Machteres, Ein Lo Domim, is a Bailim. No, says Rav, he's not a Bailim. He may become a Bailim after the Ones, when the Torah says you have to pay because you're a Bailim. But Rava holds it simultaneous with the Ones, he becomes a Bailim. According to Rav, it's Lamafreya, and according to Rava, it's only Mikan Laham. So Rav is willing to say that from the moment of Onsim, he already became a Bailim when he stole it. Because what gives him Bailis is not the fact that he took the object out of the Rishus V'Nigna. The only thing is, okay, he's not a full-fledged Bailim yet, but when the onus happens and the Torah says to him, you got to pay, the Torah is saying you're going to pay the Torah's Bailim, says Rav, what do you mean the Torah's Bailim? All of a sudden the onus happened and magic abracadabra became a Bailim? No. Rav is going to argue that he was a Bailim all along. But what triggers off his Bailus? It's the onus and the Chiv Tashlumi Onsim. At that point, the Torah makes him into a Bailim, but it's Bailus that was generated from the moment that he stole the object.
What's the story that you should say that it goes in the prayer?
Because at the end of the day, what sense does it make that because the animal dropped dead, all of a sudden he becomes a Bailim?
It's a type of Kenyan, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, maybe you're right. How do we say it's a free country, right? Democratic country. So in the context of democracy, it's hard for me to believe that, he could become a Bailim Mikan Lahaba from the moment that he's Chayiv and Onsu. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, what's going to be Machayev that he's a Bailim? What generates his Bailus is the fact that he took the object out of the Rishus L'Nigna. When he does so, we'll see if he becomes a Bailim, but maybe he becomes a Bailim at the time.
But I just want to make sure I understand. But you're saying that in any case, he only becomes a Baal L'Mafreya if there is an onus. Now, if there is no onus, then it never happens. So it would seem to me that whatever the onus does, it's easier to understand that it's Mikan Muhabam than that it's L'Mafreya.
Okay.
It's
So
more
you
of a
vote in favor of Rav.
If you become violent Kabbalah, then you should pay the Shas Gazela and then you have to take the task for the Shmita.
Right. Again, we're always, we're going to always go back and sort of do a mop-up operation, meaning after we finally settle on Rava and we figure out what Rava is saying, and if Rava is saying that he only has a Kenyan, Mikan Lahaba, blah, 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 then we're going to have to justify all the proofs that Rav would deduce, like the Chiyuv Onsim. And that's exactly, if we read the Gemara of Rav, the Gemara says, here, do you have a Elokim? I'm reading it as if it's the Shem Hashem because it's a Lashon of Shmuel. I'm not 100% sure I'm right about that, but no, I know it's a Lashon of Shmuel. But anyway, Velokim Omar Rav, Afilu Natal. Right? This is Rav, so to speak, response to Rava. Deha, and what is Rav's proof? Deha Yeshlo Damim. Finensu. Let's take a classic case of Yeshlo Damim, which could either be a Bab Machteres, the father and the son, or Stamagano. Finensu. And let's say the Kalim that he took fell apart by Ones. The sun melted them down. Chayav. He has to pay for Onsim. So Rav is challenging Rav, and he's saying, why in the world is he paying for Onsim? There's no Achrayas level for Onsim. And the answer is Alma Birshusei Kaime. And what we're suggesting is that Birshusei Kaime means that the Ganav is Chayiv for Onsim B'Toras Bailim. And Hochanami Birshusei Kaime. Now he's a Bailim over the object that he stole, and in a case of Natal, he doesn't have to return it. The Torah says Veishiv's like Zela, and here Rav says Ein Lo Damim, Kim Lev Ramimine, and Tashlumin is knocked off by the Chiyuv,
Say, according to Rav, the Shas Gazela already, that's what I'm afraid. From the Rendo, the Shas Gazela is a full Kenyan.
Correct,
plus a chiyuv tashlum,
correct.
which includes the.
Right, but I was just trying to bring Rava and Rav a little bit closer to each other. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because if you take a look at the next line, why does Rav object to Rav? Velohi, Kio Kimna Rachmana B'Shu say Le'inyan Onsim. In other words, according to Rava, it seems that the halach of Onsim means that as far as Onsim, he becomes a bailim. Right? Look at the language. Ki Okimna Rachmana B'Shu say. To what extent, or vis-a-vis what, did the Torah say that he, the Ganav, is the bailim over these kalim? And the answer is Le'inyan Onsim. So Rava does agree, it seems, fundamentally, to Rav's position that there is bailus inherent in the fact that the Ganav is chai b'onsim. Rava doesn't deny that. But he's only saying that doesn't prove anything beyond that. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't prove anything beyond that. It could mean, A, that Rav is arguing that the chiyuv onsim is only achrayus and not bailus, or B, and that understanding would be borne out or supported by the next few words of Rav. So there's no kinyan, and therefore the chiyuv onsim is a separate hatolas achrayus, that the Torah was matil achrayus on a ganav to pay for onsim, which is a little bit wild. Or should we say that what Rav is arguing is that although there is a kinyan as far as onsim is concerned, but that doesn't generate kinyanim from the get-go, from the moment that the ganav stole the object. It will be birshusei kaime as far as onsim, but only within the context of the onus, meaning, as I called it, mikan l'haba. But if you're going back to the time that he took the kalim, then at that point it's birshusei demare kaime. But here I want to suggest one other possibility. Maybe there's no machlokas between Rav and Rava about the fact that a ganav has kinyanin, and Rav has a number of tricks up his sleeve, a number of proofs that indicate that clearly a ganav is a bailim. And Rava would agree that the chiyuv onsim is b'torah's bailim. He's paying b'torah's bailim. And let's go back to the moment of the Gnei. And here I want to add something very, very important. You know what Rav and Rav are arguing about? They're arguing about Kim Leibed. And here, you may recall that we quoted the Chachmei Tzarfas in Bava Kama Daf Ayin, who claim that in a case of what's called Mamoni Gabach, we don't apply Kim Leibed, which means that if a person incurred a chiyuv misa and simultaneously he's holding on to money or an object that belongs to someone else, he's going to have to pay, even if we implement a capital punishment. Say the Chachmei Tzarfas, when do we apply Kim Leibed Ramine? The Torah says, Mishum Risha Achas Atom Achayvo, V'i Atom Achayvo Mishum Shtei Rishayos. If you have a Maisa Rishus, then if there's a greater Maisa Rishus, it, so to speak, swallows up or patters, knocks off the lower Maisa Rishus. So, for example, Amadliges Gedisho Shel Chaver B'Shabbos, Potter. Chachmei Tzarfasim say that since he burnt down the haystack of his friend, he's chayav b'toras rishus. Forget about Shabbos for a moment. Obviously, he's chayav misa for meleches havara b'Shabbos, and that's for sure rishus. But above and beyond that, even the chiyuv tashlumin, if we didn't apply Kim Leibed Ramine, would be b'toras rishus. Radical chiddush. And we don't know exactly what rishus is involved in burning down someone's haystack. Where Rabbeinu Yonah at the beginning of Masechet Avos seems to insist that it comes under lo sigzon. That when you destroy your friend's property, that's like ksela. And that has to be understood because ksela means when you take something for yourself, not when you destroy it. But apparently Rabbeinu Yonah understood that there's an Isur Lav of Gzela simply by taking it out of the Rishus of the Bailan, even if you didn't take it into your Rishus. So therefore, when you burn down someone else's haystack, you violate the Avera of Gzela because you've robbed him of his object, and therefore Kimlei B'Rameh will apply. But if you would, let's say, borrow something from somebody, that's called Mamoni Gabach, Kimlei B'Rameh would not exempt you from returning that which is his. And now we can explain the machlokus between Rav and Rava in a whole different light. And that is that Rav holds that the Heshivas Agzela Sher Gazal is not Mamoni Gabach, but rather it's Rishus. B'Toras Maisa Rishus. For the Avera of Gneva, Rav holds you will pay by returning the object. Hence, I can apply Kimlei B'Rameh. What does Rava maintain? They cannot be Kimlei B'Rameh because it's Mamoni Gabach. Why does the Torah say Veishim like Zelish or Gazal? Because the Nignav wants his object back. And again, Mashal Dome to the case where I borrow money from you. So if Reuven borrows money from Shimon, and then Reuven is Chayav Misa, again, you have to know Be'idna and exactly how to work out the scenario. He will have to return the money that he borrowed from Shimon, even if he's Chayav Misa. Because that's called Mamoni Gabah. He's not paying B'Toras Rishus, but he's paying B'Toras Mamoni Gabah. But in the case of a Heshiv like Zelish or Gazal, Yesh Lachkar, what kind of a payment is it? Is it a payment for the Avera of Gneva, and therefore comes under Rishus? And we apply the principle Mishum Rish Achas Tomachayvo, V'yah Tomachayvo Mishum Shtei Rishoyos. So no, he's paying it because he's returning the object that belongs to the Nignav. And that's called Mamoni Gabah. Hence, there's no Kimlei B'Rameh. So what we're suggesting now is that if you have to complete the kinyanim of the Baba Machteres according to Rav, then Rav is going to argue, okay, I'm not going to get into details about how his bailus is established and so forth and so on. But you simply cannot knock off a Heshim Zagzela according to Rav. Why? Because it's not what? It's not a Rishus. Now, this issue that I mentioned before about a Chiv Onsim, whether Chiv Onsim is B'Toras Bailus or B'Toras Achrayus, that might be the Machlokes in Bava Kama Daf Yudal about whether Shaman L'Shoel or Ein Shaman L'Shoel. So let me just read to you 2 lines in Tosfos in Bava Kama Daf Yudal. Tosfos says the following. Nainu Taima de Ganav Ugazlan. It's a Tosfos Dimraskal Ein Shaman. You have it, it's about 3/4 of the way down. Why is it that in Ganav and Ganav the halacha is Gazlan and Ganav is Ein Shaman? That was simple. Kanu miyad. What does miyad mean? Immediately. Kishotziu mirshus bailim. You hear that language? Tosfos is saying that Ein Shaman leganav because he made a kinyan on it. Avol mazik lo nischayev ela k'moshe hizik. Of a hainu taima, I'm skipping a little bit. V'hainu taima demand yomar af l'shoel, that Ein Shaman l'shoel, keva dechayev ba'onsim, listen carefully, nimtza shekna'o misha shahotzi miyad bailim. You hear this? No. He's using the word kinyan to explain why a shoal is chai b'onsim. Many Rishonim reject this. Shekno misha shahotzi miyad bailim v'adomim dehu nischayev k'mo ganav v'gazlan. So basically, according to Tosfos, Ein Shaman l'ganav, Ein Shaman l'shoel is fundamentally one halacha. The Mandiomer who says Ein Shaman l'shoel is extending the principle of Ein Shaman for ganav to a shoel. And it's all based on the fact that the shoel is chayav ba'onsim. And according to this Mandiomer, since a shoel is chayav ba'onsim, therefore the shoel makes a kinyan on the object. So when Rava here in our Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin yells and screams against Rava, and he says, "What are you talking against Rav?" Excuse me. And what was the language of Kiyu Kimna Rachmana, blah blah blah? But Leinian Mikne B'Shusei Demari Kaima, that's not necessarily so. According to Tosfos, the position of Rava would only make sense if you hold Ein Shaman. But if you hold Shaman, if you hold Shaman, but if you hold Ein Shaman, Tosfos says, Miyad Shotzio B'Shus Bailim, Kno. Tosfos says Kno. I know you fellas think I made up the Tosfos just to fool you. But as I stated, it says Kno. He made a kinyan. So Rav is going to argue that just like a Baba Machteres is Ein Lo Damin, and he is Motzi Mershus Bailim, therefore he acquires a kinyan. Miyad Hotzio Miyad Bailim Ukno, the language of Tosa, therefore Ein Shomin Legaz.
What's the other way of learning in Shema L'Gazlan?
Ein Shomin Legazlan means that the Achrayus is, well, I don't know that there is such a man who says, wait a second.
We want to make Rava someone else, right?
You're saying that Rava might hold Shomin Legan. Is that what you mean?
Or if there's another Hezbollah for why ain't you?
Right. But just 1 second, I got a little distracted. I wanted to make a certain point to you. Just if somebody could tell me how we're doing on the clock. Just say, it's the clock.
12 minutes.
Okay.
12, 13 minutes.
But both sides. I want to point out something important. And this might throw a monkey wrench into everything that we said about Rav. There's a sugya in Masechet Ksubis, Perkei Lunaris, on Daf Lamed Aleph. So if you get a chance, not tonight, but another night, you'll look it up. And the issue is as follows. A ganav is chayav ha'onsi. Is there a condition that has to be met? We can have the following two scenarios of a ganav who steals metaltal. We're talking about metaltal. Scenario number one is the ganav drags the metaltalin out of the house of the nignav and brings it into his own rishus. Scenario number two is where the ganav steals it and brings it out into rishus harabah, and the onus takes place where? In rishus harabah. And here again we have a machlokes, which is implicit in the Gemara, but it's explicit in the Rishonim, as to whether or not the ganav is chayiv ha'onsim. Now let's go with Tosfos. Tosfos says that why is a ganav chayiv ha'onsim and why is a shol chayiv ha'onsim? Because miyad shotzio mershus bailim kano. What kind of kinyan? If the ganav takes the object out of the rishus of the nignav and brings it into rishus harabim, he cannot acquire a kinyan in rishus harabim. So many Rishonim will argue that if the onus happens after the ganav drags the object, I'll use that word, into rishus harabim, he's not chayiv ha'onsim. And why? Because it's not miyad kano. It's going to have to be kano when he brings it into his own rishus. But if he brings it into rishus harabim, then there's no kano. Other Rishonim say no. All you need to establish the kinyan of the ganav and the chayiv ha'onsim is that he takes it out of the rishus of the nignav. You know, similar to what we said about Rabbeinu Yonah before. Do you follow me?
Technicality of Tinyanim? Talking about technicality of Tinyanim is how the ganav is kona.
So what do you say, Eli? How is the ganav kona? Is it just magical? So there are two possibilities. Either because he takes it out of the rishus of the nignav, or because he takes it into his own rishus. He didn't only take it out of the rishus of Midnam, and this is going to be a machlokas rishonim and ksuva stuff lamed aleph.
Kinyan Akbar, so you.
Yeah, all those kinyan, right? The Gemara is going to talk about Kimlei Ramine if he's chayfot saw Rishus Lashus when he brings it into Rishus Rabbi, or let's say he took it from Rishus Rabbi to Rishus Yochel. I mean, the whole sugya there of Elu Naris of Kimlei Ramine revolves around this issue. When and what creates the kinyan of the Ganav? Is it just taking it out of the Rishus of the Nignav, or bringing it into his Rishus? So I was thinking, therefore, I have a problem now with Rav. Why? Because Rav is saying that the Ganav, the Bab Makteris, is Konen. Now, wait a second. Where did he take the Caleb? It says Natan. Does Rav indicate or reveal the secret as to where he took the Caleb? Let me be very argumentative. Let's say he took the Caleb into Rishus Harabim. Rav would say, B'domim Kodinu. It's his, and he doesn't have to return it. There's no basis like Zela. Why? Because we would apply Kimli Rabbi. But we say that Rav is based on the fact that the Ganav has a Kinyan. And how do we know the Ganav has a Kinyan? Because he's Chayav and Onsim. But now we're saying, according to many Rishonim, he's only Chayav and Onsim when he brings it into his own Rishus. But now when he takes it out of the Rishus, the Nigdav into a Rishus Harabim. So again, you could always argue maybe Enochinami. Maybe Rav is talking about a case, a classic case, where he has the Caleb stashed away in his own garage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, what
The
about
man
like,
who saw the stuff where he dragged it on the floor, that was very much sakini because I think the sheikh stuff is on the man said he pick it up.
Natal could be.
Okay, you're right. We have to go through all the details, but let's say he would drag it out. In other words, what I'm asking is, according to Rav, who's arguing that the Baba Machteres is Koneh the Kalim, I'm just wondering if we have to go through all the nuances and all the possible limitations as to when and how the Ganav was Koneh. That's all I'm pointing out of. Okay. Now let me just see where I'm holding here. I have myself some notes here that I wanted to. Oh, very good. Omar, let me just put this on the side here. Omar Rav. Let's go back again. Mistabra Milsa de Rav Bishashibe. Question. Shiber where? Where did he break the Caleb?
Oh, in the house.
Did he break it while he was in the Machteres? Or it's irrelevant. And even if he breaks it out of the Machteres, he's still pot. And all the Rishonim Peh Echad, I shouldn't say Peh Echad because I don't want to insult the Ramban, who argues against all the Rishonim. All the Rishonim, Rashi, Tosas, the Balamor, everybody is on board to say that he's only potter if he breaks the Caleb where? In the Machteres. Because at that moment that he broke the Caleb and you want to be Machayv for Tashlim and Ezekiel, we're going to apply the principle of Kim Leib the Rabbi and Abola Hargacha, etc. However, if he takes the Caleb out of the Machteres and breaks it there, then he's going to be Chayav for breaking the Caleb. Comes along the Ramban, which you'll see here in Sanhedrin, Perek Ben Soru More on page Yud Zayin, in the Milchamas Hashem, and he disagrees. And he says that the tour of our Mishnah, which Rav accepts, Rav is not going to argue with that Mishnah, that he's potter for Shvira, applies no matter when and where he breaks the Caleb. And it occurs to me, I'm not sure about this, that this whole issue, which we want to get into Mitzvah Shem next week, in order to complete our Sugya Bab Machteres. Oh, next week is Yom Ha'atzmaut?
Yeah.
What day is Yom Ha'atzmaut? Wednesday? Oh, Tuesday night. Okay. Tuesday night, Wednesday. Right. Okay, that's good. So I always find it odd that Yom Ha'atzmaut is a Yom Ha'Pagra, I have, anyway. So we'll meet in 2 weeks. All right. So Belina, to remind me, I want to talk to you about this Ramban that Bob Machteres is potter even what? Even if he breaks the kalim outside of the Machteres. But I think that perhaps there's another sugya, which you mentioned. What's your first name again? Tzvi. So both of you, Tzvi. Interesting. Which you mentioned before about whether you pay kishas like zelo or kshash shviru mesa. That I think that sugya might be relevant to this machlokas between the Rishonim and the Ramban. So let me just read to you the machlokas between the Ktsos and the Nesivos. And Reb Chaim comes to defend the Nesivos. The Gemara says in Bava Kama Samach Hey, so you want to add this to your homework list. You have Yud Aleph, and now you have Samach Hey. The Gemara says the following: Haiman de Gosel Chavita de Chamra, right? So he stole a barrel of wine. Meikara, meaning at the time of the Geneva, Shavya Zuzah, it was worth 1 zuz. Ulabesov, later on it went up in value. There was a run for wine, right? And it's worth Dalet Zuzah, 4 zuzah. Tavrei El Shasya, if the Ganav breaks the keli and all the wine spills out, or he drinks the wine, Mishalim Dalet, he pays 4 zuzah. What it means is that forget about the original Gzela that generated right now a chiyuv of 1 zuz, okay? The object went up in value, and he pays B'toras Mazik when he breaks or drinks the wine. So far, so good. Says the Gemara, Itmar Mimela, if on the other hand, the barrel breaks on its own, he didn't break it, Mishalem Zuzah, he only pays 1 zuz, which means that he pays Kishas Hagzela. Now, what logic could possibly push you to that position to accept the underlying assumption is Gemara that he pays Kishas Hagzela? The answer is he made what? Everybody, he made a kinyan. So he made a kinyan, he pays Kishas Hagzela. Why does the Gemara say that he pays Dalit? That's only because Tavrei Shasya. He broke it. And at the time that he broke it, what was it worth? 4 zuz. And here we have machlokas between the Ktsos and the Nesivos. The Ktsos takes what we would consider, I think, the intuitive interpretation of this Gemara. Why in Tavrei V'Shasya does he pay Kishas Shvira or Mesa, the Dalit Zuzim? Because he pays as a mas. Forget about Geneva. The Geneva is history for our purposes. He pays as a mas.
But he's mazik something that belongs to the original ballot. Not his.
Correct. Okay, you're copying the Nesivos already. Well, let's hear the Nesivos. Yeah, what? I'm sorry.
You said before he made a kinyan. So
Oh.
it doesn't work.
Comes along the Nesivos, and he says that the chiyuv of paying Dalid is bidin gzela, not bidin mazmi. It's almost as if the original gzela still exists, and everybody tries to understand why the Nesivos argues against the Ktsos, when it seems that the Ktsos is the more intuitive understanding of Tavrei V'Shasya. He pays Kishash Shviru Mesa because he's a Masik. No. Comes all the Nesivos, and he says he pays, but this is all in Siman Lamed Daled, if anyone who wants to look it up. But again, you have to spend about a month on this. Anyway, so Siman Lamed Daled, and the Nesivos says what? Hachiyuv Tavrei V'Shasya we did Selah. Whoa. So Reb Chaim says that he found a Rambam that is explicitly like the Nesivos. Now, where is this Rambam? That's a problem. But there is a Rambam at the beginning of Hilchas Geneva, that's Perek Aleph Halacha Yudal. I hope somebody's writing this down and then you can put it on the WhatsApp group. And the Rambam says the following. You know what? I'm just thinking now it's time for Ma'ariv. I don't want to mess this up. But again, 3 Ma'ariv Makomos. Bava Kama Yud Aleph, Bava Kama Samach Hey, and Shulchan Aruch Shem Bishpat, Ktsosa Nesiva Sima Lamed Daled, and the Ram Perik Aleph Milchus Gneva Alocha Lamed Dal.
Good dollar.
Alocha Yudal. Okay then? All right.
Yeah.
Oh, great. We have a minion.
Yeah.
So let's have mine. Ari, are you in you? How many do we have? 11. 11 is even better than 10.
Plus click down.
It's good. Give me one more shear and we'll see if we can wrap it all up. Then we go on to a massive sugya called Kiddush Hashem.
Now we are not.
Right? Do we have a shliach tzibur?
We're okay.